Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to the Crescendo room at the Throckmorton Theater. Please welcome Mort Sahl.
Thank you very much, folks. Let me tell you what all this is. You know, I took a fall, landed squarely on my head on bricks, and a couple of ribs. But the Mill Valley Fire Department saved me for a greater chore here tonight. So that's why the walker. And thanks for coming. And I hope it's worth it. And, you know, to start with, when I was in Chicago, two of the acolytes of Barack Obama started telling me, what's wrong with Caucasians? You never gave us an even break. You never gave us an even chance. You never let us live. And I threw my hands up and I said, what's next? Reparations? Oh, not such a joke. There's a new book out by Valerie Jarrett in which she explains, or attempts to explain, why she never left Obama's side. As soon as I met his wife, I knew these people had to be in the White House, and she stays there with them. And she's always with them, even in the Oval Office. And she, you remember Roseanne was fired by ABC for suggesting that Valerie Jarrett was like a guard. And you recall that Michelle Obama, when he was elected, said, this is the first time I've ever been proud of this country. And was taken to task, not really, but in a manner by Rahm Emanuel, the chief of staff. He said, we're going to lose white votes. So that went on for 8 years. And you notice that war with 309 bases in Africa, American bases. But we're not occupied with that. We're busy going to war with Iran. And the guy engineering the war with Iran, Bolton, was part of the Iran-Contra thing with Oliver North and was pardoned by Bush. He was convicted and pardoned by Bush. So we're off to a flashy start. Of course, around Mill Valley, all people talk about is Trump. Ever since the night he won, or Hillary lost, depending on your point of view, the liberals here have been sitting shivering with the code word for it about Trump. You know, like that was Mecca with Obama, and now they haven't had enough. They have the temerity to suggest Biden. And so, look back at Joe Biden. When Anita Hill comes up and says, Clarence Thomas shouldn't be a Supreme Court justice because he propositioned me when I was a government worker, and not too subtle either, the jurist, remember? He held up a Coca-Cola can and said, can't you see the pubic hair where the can was open? And she complained and got no satisfaction. Who attacked her? Joe Biden. Her credibility. And she's standing away with a great jurist who has never spoken as long as he's been on the court. And later on, when they're about to invade Iraq, the chief weapons inspector for the United States says, I've been all through Iraq. They don't have any weapons of mass destruction. And Biden says, I think it's considerably above your pay grade to determine that. He said, well, she puts tape over the guy's mouth. Joe Biden. So if the Democrats are down to that, you'll never see them in office again. Plus the fact that he's bribing officials in Estonia, trying to push those countries to surround NATO countries and get into a war, which of course will supply. And it isn't so funny, it's just the idea that they never give up. What are the accomplishments of Joe Biden? Anyway, that's my opening statement. Who uses that phrase? Judge Jeanine Pirro on the Fox News channel. So anyway, I'm surviving all this, and a couple of good notes. I met a great girl. Great, not good, great. In touch with nature at its most rarefied. And not like a Jewish girl. Listen to her fathers too often. And whose quote was that? Each man kills the thing he loves. Oscar Wilde. I'll give you a couple of other quotes. Thomas Wolfe said, look around the dinner table. The enemy is greed. He looks like a member of the family, but he's dedicated to its destruction by driving it the wrong way emotionally. Great American writer, maybe the best. Greed. And for those of you who have aspirations to be in the arts, at the end of, I'm trying to think of this, the Modern American Library, he said, in the end, you will be alone if you're truly an artist. Only the muse will be with you, and only if you haven't betrayed him during your lifetime. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff. It sustained me through some very perilous times. Now, I want to move on from this for you. A good friend of mine crashed last week, and you all know his work. Alvin Sargent, who of course won the Oscar 4 times. He wrote Ordinary People, and he wrote The Sterile Cuckoo, and he wrote one of the other two great pictures he wrote. I wrote The Electric Horseman. And he wrote an awful lot of stuff with the director, Sidney Pollack. And when I was at Warner Brothers, I used to hang around his office. He had a great kitchen, you know. And he turned to Al one day and when I walked out and he said, I don't know about Mort. He said, I don't know what he wants. So he said, well, you know, he sold a script to Eastman and he wants to sell you a script. And he said, Sidney said to Al, what if it's terrible? He said, then you'll have an excuse not to make his next one. See, he always saw the other side of the joke. A very pure writer. He wrote Nuts, too. The one with Streisand and Richard Dreyfuss. Has his hand on a lot of stuff. Great writer, very human writer. Sometimes used to get into scenes by playing all the parts. Have the characters surround them and talk to each other. And that's where the great dialogue comes from. What's a good piece of dialogue? In this Gun for Hire, Alan Ladd is hitchhiking, and Veronica Lake is Mariah. she drops him off. And she says, good night. And he says, it's not good night, it's goodbye. And it's hard saying goodbye. She said, why? You've never met me before. He said, every guy's seen you before. The trick is to find you. That's the part of the movies that woke us all up. Sullivan's Travels. All the good old stuff. Jimmy Stewart. Where having character meant you might even have a chance to prevail. You don't see much of that now. Not if you go to the movies. Nobody goes to the movies. I know what you're going to say. Nobody goes. You're right. Have you been to the Soapbox? What's the name of our theater, Kathleen?
Sequoia?
Yeah. They had a picture with Redford and Nick Nolte. And Lucy went, of all people. And she goes, what time does the Redford picture go on? The manager said, what time can you be here, Lucy? And that's the volume of business in a picture business. But they can kill something while they're claiming to love it and celebrate it. I think that happened here. I mean, think back to Roosevelt's America that sits down with no money and no work and defeats Hitler and Japan. And think of it now. Now the most they can do is disconnect PG&E. That's as much they can come up with. I mean, think of Roosevelt, and then think of Jerry Brown. Don't even think of Gavin Newsom. Well, I guess you weren't. There's always that chance. Anyway, you know my friend Kathleen Hahn, who is manning the Facebook feed on this streams, you know. And we used to stream on Mort Sahl Official. But Lucy got boxed in the office and forgot to renew it. So Mort Sahl Official was bought by the Thai government for $550. They own it now. So if you call there, you get some guy in Bangkok. I thought it would be streamed. The internet should belong to people. It doesn't. It belongs to the CIA. That's what the idea is. You sit in a room and you look at that for entertainment. It watches you. That's really what's happening. And it all facilitated by those glorious patriots in San Jose. And you all know who they are. That was the idea. They can have America if they give them permission to go in the back and watch you. The original joke of they're watching you was by William O. Douglas in the Supreme Court, who was by far the greatest liberal we ever had in high government. Roosevelt been on here 40, and Douglas gave a stay of execution to the Rosenbergs. Remember when J. Edgar Hoover said, we're going to fry them tonight and we can't fry them at all? There were 300,000 people demonstrating in Times Square against the execution because there wasn't that much evidence. And they did it anyway, as Cold War hysteria. And then Douglas, as it happened, was a friend of Joseph Kennedy, who I know, but I didn't call a friend, but I knew him. And they were playing poker one night, and Kennedy said to him, am I crazy to be your friend? So Douglas said, why? He said, well, you like Roosevelt, I think he's a dictator. I think Hitler is going to win. He did. The president's father thought Hitler was going to win. Wasn't too offended by the idea. And contributed all the money to Senator Joe McCarthy to keep that committee running, looking for communists. Am I crazy to be your friend? And Douglas said, based on the evidence you present, you're crazy. And here's what a justice should say. Have you ever been to the Supreme Court? When you go in, it says, the past is prologue. And you might say to me, what does that mean? It means you ain't heard nothing yet in English. And then all these guys come out in black robes, you know, and a big sign that says, silence. And these guys that have helped presidents get elected shouldn't be carrying out the trash. And you know what, you can think of a couple, they carry on this charade up there. And so there's still a lot to be told. If I were, you know, I talk to the comedians, they don't think so. The comedians are busy swearing and trying to make sex a joke. It might be, but you might look at your life before you make that determination. Anyway, that's a few of the things we're going to cover tonight. Did I introduce Kathleen?
Yes.
Kathleen Hahn, my partner here, who is taking the stream from Facebook, which you know has liberated all of us. I've made some wonderful friends. Two of them were the firemen that picked me up off the floor 2 days ago when I hit the bricks. They took that job temporarily because they weren't sure it was going to be work in America. What is it supposed to be? Biden versus Trump? Joe Biden. Remember he used to go and get hamburgers for Obama? They'd leave in the middle of the day with their shirt sleeve rolled up. And that'll be the end. I was saying, where is it going? If that comes, that'll be the end. First of all, they're going to run out of money. And around here, of course, the politics of Mill Valley are to attribute everything to Trump. Where does he get these ideas? From his father. Where do we all get our idea? You know, my father thought I was crazy, and I did everything I could to impress him. I lived in a $25 a month rental apartment in downtown Los Angeles until I came up to the Hungry Eye and rolled the dice and got lucky. But my dad, I don't think he thought I was very talented. Mothers think that. My mother wrote a letter to Herb King, and he came in and saw the show at the Hungry Eye and began to publicize it. And it went on from there like a roller coaster. But America's really a land of opportunity. But there's no mystery. Trump is the way he is because of his father. That was the model. That's why he never smiles. They're building a monument to Trump. They're building a log cabin. A guy inside in a blue suit and a red tie. He was born that way, in a manger, with a blue suit and a red tie. So, has anybody called in, Kathleen?
Yes, Mort. You mentioned Joe Biden. Do you have any comments about his son, Hunter Biden, in the Ukraine?
About who?
Biden's son, Hunter Biden, in the Ukraine.
Well, one son works as a vice president of a Ukrainian oil company. Ukraine is like Nazi Germany. There's a reason they're not in the Russian Federation. Have any of you ever been to Russia? I went to Russia. I was there in 1960. That was before Putin. He was still a cop then. Now it's a democratic country, it says here. But the question is, what are we? We were the ones with the lamp that showed everybody the way. That's who we were, you know. In fact, when he started talking about building a wall, Trump, everybody said, what about the lady with the lamp? And you ever think about the Statue of Liberty? You know, down near San Diego, there's a place where women go to lose weight and learn how to reapply makeup and everything. And it's called the Golden Door. And a friend of mine suggested that have a sign outside and said, I lift my face beside the Golden Door. So, anyway, he was a comedy writer. That was Al Sargent's brother, Herb Sargent, who was the head writer of Saturday Night. By the way, speaking of Saturday Night, do you remember when Alec Baldwin said, if Trump is elected, I will leave the country? And Barbara Streisand said that too. Do you think it would be better here if all those people had left the country? Give us another chance of freedom? What else, Kathleen? Anybody interested?
Yes. What do you like about Trump, if anything?
To admire?
What do you admire or like about Trump?
Well, he doesn't play to the cameras. Have you ever seen a picture of him smiling? You know, the first time I met him, he was with Merv Griffin trying to get the Beverly Hilton Hotel. He's trying to outpoint Merv Griffin. I think it was called The Art of the Deal, which of course was not written by him. He was some Jewish kid at the University of Pennsylvania. An enterprising Jewish kid. There aren't too many of them anymore because of the internet. There are too many people believing what they see on there, which amazes me. I don't know how people can stay glued to that. I can tell you what you can trust on there. If you read political articles, anything by Paul Craig Roberts, who was the Undersecretary of the Treasury under Reagan, great American. Also, Ron Paul, who was 45 years in the House of Representatives. And his son is Rand Paul, who says growing up in Ron Paul's house was nurture versus nurture. A real liberal, a Republican. I don't think a Democratic Party has anything to do with liberal. Hasn't for a long time. It's part of what's wrong with it. They would not accept her, no matter how much money, you know, and him carrying on with all those girls. You know, I haven't listed half the girls Clinton had in there, which was common knowledge. If you knew the Secret Service guy, they would tip you. One day I was at the White House when Carter was president. I worked there, and you know that thing at Thanksgiving where they bring the turkey out, they pardon him so he won't be killed at Thanksgiving. He gives him a pardon. So he kept the turkey at the White House. So I said to the Secret Service man, what do you have a turkey here for? And he said, spare parts. So, which was a comment on the Carter administration. He's still around. Tough life. Tough. Unforgiving. And I think he probably means it. Anyway, you know, I was on NBC on the Today Show every day when he was nominated. I worked in New York at the convention. And in front, he stayed at the Americana on 7th Avenue, and the different floors in the hotel are named after states, you know, anxiety, depression. So in front of his room was all room service stuff. It was all cheese sandwiches on white bread and glasses of milk. So anyway, we waited outside, and he was nominated, and he comes out, and the Secret Service was in a Cadillac at that time. Kennedy was the Lincoln. More about that later. And he goes to Madison Square Garden. So here comes Miss Lillian. Remember his mother was in the Peace Corps in India? Here comes his mother. So Ed Bradley, at 69, he says, now that he's going to be the man, do you identify with Rose Kennedy? And she said, no. Jimmy would never do anything they would shoot him for. Why? Nobody ever commented on that again. And have you seen 60 Minutes lately? It's sort of flat. Anderson Cooper, if you don't get enough of them on CNN, flat. You know, no jabs, like when Mike Wallace was there, any of those guys. I did the show a long time ago when I worked in the city, and Mike Wallace interviewed me. He said, you have more than a following, you have a kind of a rabble following, you know, rebels. And he said, they act like you're some kind of messiah, and that can be dangerous to your career. I said, actually, it can be fatal, if you think back on it. I take the Bible very literally. I guess it surprises the audience. But we did a show here in the main room for Lucy with NBC about the Kennedy assassination with Tom Brokaw. And Brokaw tried to switch evidence and tell me I'm crazy and everything. And afterwards he said, go off camera. He said, you know, I'm really still your friend. And it was good to see you. And he kissed me. That's the way the original betrayal ends. You remember that? Yeah, you remember your Bible. So, Joe Biden, and he's running ahead of Kamala Harris. Now here you got a DA who lost 80% of the cases. Nobody mentioned that. Jim Garrison won 100% of his cases in New Orleans. I know, I was on that staff. What did you learn there? I was there 5 years. What I learned is a witness will stay on the stand under oath and continue to lie endlessly. Can you give us an example that would get a laugh? Well, there was this witness on the stand, it was like 95, black guy. And the DA says, did you see the crime perpetrated, Doc? Yes, I did. Do you have any idea what the movie was? No, I don't. So the judge, who was about to go to sleep, said, are you a doctor? I said, no. Do you have a PhD? I said, no. He said, well, why on earth what does it mean when people call you Doc? He said, it don't mean nothing. It's like when they called you, Your Honor. That's a true story. We can tell by the lack of a laugh during the floor. Yes, continue, Kathleen.
Yes, Mort, you mentioned Anderson Cooper. Did you know his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt?
I knew of her. He talked about her the other night. I don't know if you saw that.
I did. She passed.
We walked down on the 90th floor of this building she owned, and my brother jumped to his death. But I thought positively and went ahead and became a newsman. He also was a case officer for the CIA, which is a unique perspective for reporting the news. How long can you stay with CNN in a day? With them on top of Trump, continually. See, the role of the news, when they came off the 30-minute news, when it was Cronkite, Chet Huntley, and David Brinkley, and they went to this endless news, that's when it stopped being news. And I'll tell you what it can be. For instance, You know that lawyer on there, Jeffrey Toobin? I was saying, well, he's just been indicted, Jeffrey. What are his chances of being acquitted? 0. He's finished. He has no credibility. Thank you, Jeffrey. Toobin's mother was a reporter at CBS, and at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, she set up a hotline between Kennedy and Castro to make sure it didn't become World War III. So you can do a lot more than wear horn glasses and keep talking about World War III or 3.5. It just keeps getting closer. It's hard to believe. Yeah, what else did I tell?
Well, O.J. Simpson just opened a Twitter account. Would you consider following him?
That's pretty good all by itself. I don't know, you all must have kids. What do you think the internet has done now? You find any of them curious? Are they interested in anything besides making money? I mean, do they want to change the world? Do they want to love anybody? That's the active verb. That's why Sargent was a great writer, because he believes it. And do you remember the picture of Ordinary People? Mary Tyler Moore and Donna Sutton. Al wrote that. And in the picture, there's a psychiatrist, and Tim Hutton keeps going to see him. Any hour of the day or night. I've never met a psychiatrist so dedicated. He's always there, doesn't sleep, doesn't have a family. It's not your fault. It's all right. Don't do away with yourself. Well, I'm taking a break, you know. So Redford cast me as a psychiatrist. And he kept saying, the Mort Sahl part, the Mort Sahl part. So about 3 weeks in, he said, don't call it the Mort Sahl part. Somebody else is going to play it. So he said, why? And Redford said, I have to direct this, and how do you tell Mort Sahl he's wrong? And we had a long romance, Redford and I. One day he said, I've talked to everybody, and they're all bankrupt emotionally. So one of the writers said, I got a guy who can talk to this somebody. I've got to meet Mort. So Redford made a lunch date with me. And then before the lunch, he backed out. He said, I've been hurt too many times. I can't be disappointed in another guy. So we overlooked my genius because of Redford's feelings. And we haven't had lunch yet. I'm getting very hungry. So most of this is true. Did you see the picture? Ordinary People. Mary Tyler Moore is very cold, not like, you know, you're going to make it after all. It's not like that. And Southern, I think, is a stick. He says, I've starred in 21 pictures, there's nothing left. How about becoming an actor? There's nothing else in your future. So, anyway, yes, what else tonight, Catherine?
What made you decide to write Heartland?
I thought the American people got a bum rap. They'd say, the average six-pack Joe doesn't give a damn about anything but his paycheck, and he doesn't care, he goes where he's pointed, and they don't want good entertainment, and they can't think that constant libel goes on. I thought there was a better core to this country. And what brought my people here, as you know, my family came from the Eastern Islands. You've seen the statue. No, they came from Lithuania. And I thought the country got a bum rap. And The first good review of the book was by Nancy Reagan. Said she cried when she read it. And then, of course, Amazon reprinted it, and I just rewrote the foreword. And I've done some heavy living. You know, I was married 3 times. 4 if I get lucky. A good woman can make you into a human being. They know where the door is. We keep losing the key, but men think if they make money, well, I'll tell you what's happened in America. My niece called me from, she lives on the coast in Florida, and she was China's niece. I was married to China for 25 years. She was the head of the Playboy Bunnies. So Vicky said, "What's going on, Mort?" I said, "I'm thinking about getting married." She said, "You don't have to marry women anymore." Isn't that an interesting response? From a woman. I thought the interior of women looked forward to that day. In fact, there's a lyric from that. If you're watching this show, I'm so proud you chose me from all the crowd. Can't you see? I'm lucky to be me. The Broadway, Bernstein wrote that. But you don't have to marry them anymore. Have to. A gun at your hand. What happened to romance? I conducted all my romances at the movies. That's how I got everybody there. I take them to a Jimmy Stewart movie where they thought everything was possible. He was trying to stay afloat financially so he could marry Donna Reed. I believe them. I don't think I was a fool. I think it's true. I think we were richer. The movies were a dime when we were kids. But we were richer than people are now with $170 Bluetooth headphones. And that's what's wrong with Apple. It's sterile. And I use that word advisedly. And it helps if you believe everything you say. Even at the risk of you going out of here and saying, "You guys are crazy." Doesn't matter. You have to intoxicate yourself to inoculate yourself against the battle. Because most people do not want to be called to battle, even though, ironically enough, the people they vote for keep getting them into battle. That's the irony of all of this. Guantanamo is still open. Think of how many years, no trials. And it's all because they blew up the building. Who did? The Saudis did. Why didn't they ever say that? They never say. When the buildings blow up, why does building 7 shake but not go down? It's very interesting to speculate on it. Yeah. Could it be that the government lied? I can't accept that. Actually, they're very good at it. No, they're not good at it. You can catch them. So they're not very good at it, but they're well practiced. And of course, when George Bush was in office, Cheney was the president. That's what it was. And, you know, I know a lot of these people that I talk about. I worked for President Kennedy and his father. And I knew Bush very well. And the old man asked me to write for the kid. And I met him when he was governor of Texas in Austin. This is all true. And he said to me, "Have you heard a lot of those stories about me carousing?" not showing up for the National Guard. He said, I stopped all that. I don't use any drugs. I don't drink. So I said, congratulations. And I wondered why we haven't seen you in any of the meetings. You know? And I said, how did that happen? He said, I was born again. So now we have to pause and ask the audience, if you had the opportunity to be born again, why would you come back as George Bush? That's the first one. And he said to me, I was born again, and I know that I can get into heaven because I've accepted these precepts as a Christian. So I said, that would mean that Jesus couldn't get into heaven. So he said, why not? He's curious. I don't like him. And I said, because he was Jewish. He said, yeah, that's true. You know, and he asked me to prove that he was Jewish. And well, he lived at home till he was 33. And his mother was convinced he was God. And he said to me, well, they're not making Jews the way they used to. You know, they're making Teslas. The new way. Any more questions, Kathleen?
Yes, Mort. What do you think of modern parenting?
Can you define it for me? What is it? I mean, what do they mean?
Parenting today, how parents...
Oh, in general?
Yes.
Not good. They give them a phone. They give them a phone and they see them if they graduate from medical school. Why would you want to go in debt to get into college? You know, that's the way you get a quick laugh. You look out here with hair this color and you say, I'm close to paying off my student loan. Why would anybody go into Hawk to go to one of these second-rate schools and look for a job? The deadening of my senses was going to SC. Man, was that awful, boring. And I majored in city management. And I made a couple of remarks about the CIA and the Pentagon, and the teacher said to me, if you maintain this stance of criticizing your superiors, I suggest you become a comedian. Well, we're still trying. And the funny thing is, as long as I've been at this, which is now 65 years, the comedians are not very daring, are they? To think back to all the people I started, I invented the comedy record and I saw it that everywhere was recorded. And a lot of them are still my friends. But they're not very daring. You know, to put the electorate on notice that they're roiling in the ranks because there isn't. The kids are all worried about a telephone. No rebels. I remember the first time I got married, my wife's father hated me. Hated me. Forbade her to go out with me and everything. But we got on together because of jazz. Dave Brubeck and Paul Disney. And then eventually, when I got into the business, I worked with all those guys, the colleges. And her father said to me, how was I to know you would become Mort Sahl? Well, I haven't yet. I'm working toward it, but don't you notice how tame they are? You think back, you know, I usually refer to, remember when Clinton had all the trouble with Monica Lewinsky? I thought, how can you make a joke out of this without being tasteless? Any guy that could get a Jewish girl to do that for him deserved to be president. That's how you do it. But I didn't do it because I have a Puritan streak. The part that believes love is too rewarding if you can find it. You can find it. I'll tell you a shortcut if you want to find it. Go on the internet and look up any song you like and look at the lyrics. Look at the intent of the lyrics. Just get a video of Sinatra singing any Hoagie Carmichael song. Or Sahl, what was his name? He wrote the theme for a Playboy show. Playboy, you follow, it's typical America and Facebook and all this hokum. Look what the guy did. He came out of Southern Illinois and he made billions by taking a picture of a naked girl so that people 15 could buy it and go upstairs to her room and get under a blanket with a flashlight. And then what happened? The girl was Marilyn Monroe. And to put out the magazine, he borrowed $500 from his mother to get him out. And I knew him, and I knew her. She is the celebrity I'm asked most about by young people. You know that, you know that. But when they say Marilyn Monroe, their eyes glow, even if they're 15. Was a good person. Highly exploited, but not what's new about that in America. And I met her at a cast party. You know, sometimes when a movie is over, they have a rap party. I would be at the rap party. I did it for Brando with One Eye Jacks, and I did it when the Misfits was made. The director, John Huston, brought me down and walked in. And he said, "This is Marilyn Monroe." And she took my hand and she said to me, "Don't be afraid." So I said, "I'm not afraid." And she said, "Mort, everybody's afraid." Which is kind of prophetic, isn't it? That's another death in Hollywood that the coroner in Los Angeles knows nothing about. They sanitized the apartment. There's a lot down there. The story about Manson is a phony story. You know who passed away since I saw you all was Doris Day. Great dame. Great. She lived in Carmel. And every day she'd go to the Safeway to the bulletin board, put up puppies for adoption. And I know because Eastwood always tells me about that. That's the guy that sold my first picture. Got a picture coming out. He's age 7. Got a picture coming out. Called a mule. Good guy. Not one of the herd. You know, he thinks for himself. It was pretty funny at the Romney convention when he said Obama was elected. Oprah Winfrey cried. I cried. He said, big laugh. You remember Romney? He's now a senator. You remember he ran as a Republican? Still nothing, huh? Let me see if this helps. It looks like everybody's first husband. Does that help you? No, it didn't help him. This audience is rarefied. It hasn't had common experience. Or it could be that the show isn't funny. I hate to consider that as an alternative. It gives me nowhere to go. Yeah, I had a kind of a lucky upbringing here. You know, I had the hungry eye in the laboratory to try out the jokes for years, and had North Beach, and San Francisco was pretty groovy. Kids were in the street in Berkeley, so they wouldn't have to go to Vietnam. Instead of going along with Lyndon Johnson, who dropped more tonnage on North Vietnam than we dropped in all of World War II. And Agent Orange, which poisoned the commander-in-chief over there, Admiral Zongos, and it killed his son, turned him into an anti-war guy. Wild stuff, you know. All part of our history. And I was up here in North Beach. Paul Desmond lived up there, and near Coit Tower, and Brubeck was a teller at the American Trust Company and studying at Mills College. And then we turned the kids' heads around about jazz and about politics. The comedians never thought I would succeed talking about politics because they thought it's too Catholic an area, small c. You know, yes, Kathleen, anything else then?
Are there any questions in the room?
Yes.
1 second. Go ahead.
When you started comedy, do you remember one of the worst times you bombed?
Can you hear that? When you first started in comedy, can you remember your first time that you bombed?
The worst.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the worst.
Oh, yeah.
The worst time.
The first thing that happened was I was living in Berkeley with Susan, my first wife. And she used to smoke Camels, drink red wine, and play Billie Holiday records. So she said to me, "You may not be any good, but if you don't get this out of your system, you'll always blame me, and marriage will be hell for me. So you got to try it." So I said, "Where will I try it?" She said, "Go to the Hungry Eye." I said, "What if they don't laugh?" She said, "Even if they don't get it, they'll laugh anyway. They'll think it's whimsical humor." So, and we might have a life. So I did. And they hated it. Then in the midst of this, a girl who was the third act married a composer and goes on a honeymoon. So Enrico said, "You can have her week." And the guy wrote a song called "That's Amore," which of course made him a billionaire, and she never came back. So then Enrico said, "Well, this guy's really terrible." But the manager fired him. The manager said, "You never want to get your hands dirty. If he's so terrible, you fire him." So they had an argument. So I stayed another week. And then I began to get the jokes from her, and I noticed that the big laughs are the more dangerous stuff. Not set jokes, but the way people feel. So in other words, a cop stops me on the Bay Bridge, 45, and as he walks back to write the ticket, I said, "Okay, Hitler." He said, "What?" I said, "Nothing." They identified with that and began to laugh. So I started. Herb Caen was then on the front page of the Chronicle. So I started quoting a column. Then he started printing. Why did he start printing it? Because he got a letter from a lady saying, "If you're Mr. San Francisco, why haven't you picked up on this kid at the Hungry Eye?" Because all he did was go to the Blue Fox every night, or Jack's for lunch. So the letter was written by my mother, who lived on Sutter Street, because it was close to the bus. So that was the beginning. He came over. Then he started bringing the celebrities. He brought in Kirk Douglas, Lancaster. That encouraged me to go into reality. And I started talking about Nixon and Vietnam. And the feelings were very, people were really adamant. They were angry. So I tapped into that. All the comedians said, it's too dangerous. Of course, they were wrong. Then I went to Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, and we made the first recorded comedy record. Mine didn't sell, but I recorded Shelley Berman, and that sold. So I got famous in Chicago. Then I went out to the colleges with Brubeck, and we got to Kent State. And Brubeck said, I got a friend here I'd like to bring up, but the drummer said, they won't understand it. And Brubeck said, if they can get through the music we play, they should understand him. And he put me up there. And then I got a college tour out of it, 200 colleges. And then it began a snowball. So it meant there was something on people's minds that wasn't being discussed by the comedian. What? I don't want to go to Vietnam. Then when I began to work for political candidates, I noticed they were all too afraid to say those things. I said, no. As soon as you say what's on the mind, unconscious mind of the audience, you'll succeed. And I wound up being a writer for Kennedy. And that took me into the whole other domain. And that took me in the assassination investigation by Garrison, who Oliver Stone made a movie about with Costner. Not a word of it which is accurate. Because I was there when they arrested the guys. I was investigating in their office for 5 years. And I learned that there is no Santa Claus. But that's okay. I'm still here. And when I walk by, I can tell a woman from all the rest. I owe that to America, and I owe it to the movies. And if you believe in a movie, it's even more vivid. Think back. Jimmy Stewart, It's a Wonderful Life, Donna Reed. John Wayne, when he says, in one of the Ford Mustangs, the guy said, I'm sorry, sir. He said, don't apologize, it's a sign of weakness. And I took all that stuff to be, the letter of the law. And it all worked for me. And when I began to write movies, I wrote the old movies. The movies I write, if you look at them sideways, they're transparent. Then one night, you love this. Bush is running for re-election. And they give a party for him in Malibu with, among others, Johnny Carson and Goldie Hawn and Jimmy Stewart. So during the party, Jimmy Stewart comes in looking very gray. And he says to his wife, I gotta go home, Gloria, I really don't feel good. She said, Jim, it's not good form to die in someone else's house. And Stewart said to her, and it could be considered overacting. So I saw a lot of people there that were models, and I incorporated all that. Carson and I had not spoken in years because of Garrison. And he and I made up that night. But actually, that isn't why we made up. We made up because after 3 awful marriages, we found a real dame. He was happy. And then, of course, he was unhappy when they replaced him with Jay Leno. Think how that must have felt after 17 years. And so I did a lot of off-the-cuff stuff. And it generally paid off because people feel suppressed. And the movies know how to do that, I don't know how many of you saw a picture with Wayne called The Cowboys. He plays a destitute rancher who has to take junior high school kids to drive the herd to market. And they go in the water and they start to drown. And they complain, I can't breathe. He says, keep moving. His air on the other side, keep moving. And this kid says under his breath, it's son of a bitch. And Wayne says, what did you say? I said, he said, louder. I said, you're a mean old son of a bitch. He said, that's better. And he said, by the way, son, I wouldn't make a habit out of doing that. So he was John Wayne. And he was John Wayne all the way through. And so were the guys that wrote for him. You have to believe in the myth to believe the myth. That's why some marriages work and a lot don't. You got to believe in it. You have to be a romantic. You don't need to be a clinical laboratory technician. You have to be romantic. You have to say, God touched me on the shoulder. Not, is there a God? Should I believe in God? How much will I make if I believe in God? You can't do that. You got to go with the flow of your instincts. A lot of it has to do with who your parents were. You know, John O'Hara once wrote, some men see what happens to their fathers and it intimidates them. But some men see what happens to their fathers and it invigorates them. And a lot of things to remember. I'll give you an even better one than that. I saw a picture made in 1930 with Ronald Colman. And he comes in the office just with his partner. I don't know if marriage is possible. And his partner says, you know what's wrong, don't you? We hope they will never change, and they always hope we will. Somebody wrote that in 1929. So somebody was on for the gamble. That's the reason if you rent any movies on Netflix or anything, if you rent anything directed by Sam Peckinpah, you'll believe it. If you rent anything with Steve McQueen in it, you'll believe it. They had that element of vulnerability and believability and the magic of America. You know that if you play by the rules, eventually you win. That means you'll be able to be yourself, not Anderson Cooper. Yeah, that's the thing. And up here, of course, they play the game that the only thing wrong with television is Fox News. If only it were so. There's nothing there except propaganda. And they're wrong. The American people are smarter than them. They're not that much smarter than that, but they're smarter than that. It's amazing. Anything else, Kathleen?
Yes, Mort, we have one last question in the room. Paul?
What does he think of what Gavin Newsom said about not reparations, but apologizing to the Native Americans?
Mort, what are your thoughts about Gavin Newsom's stance on apologizing to the Native Americans?
I think it's more of the liberals. You know, you're saying, hey, the lights won't come on. They say, well, listen, we have a lot of problems. It's bait and switch. In other words, what is his background? Is his background coming clean? And who inspired him? I know, soon they're going to tell you, well, because of the fire, the cost of fighting the fires, we can't have any schools. Look at the madness of all this. We can have the Pentagon, but we can't have any schools. Did any of you know that the lobbyist for PG&E is the highest paid lobbyist in Washington? Mm-hmm. He gets more money than anybody, even the guy from the drug companies. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to go to a doctor and have him write your prescription, but you can't afford to fill it. You want to see people have lost hope? Go into the CVS pharmacy department and have somebody fill a prescription. Look at their faces. They're like in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The only thing they attempted to do is punch something out to wake them up till the end of the shift. But the drugs don't work. That's the irony. Well, it's ripe with irony, but you never should have elected Newsom. Jerry Brown should not be rewarded. The Democratic Party should not be able to automatically demand your support because it hadn't earned it, because they don't respect you. You got to respect the people. If you look back at World War II, Stalin, and I doubt if anybody else is a fan of his, he respected the people. And the people rose at Stalingrad. The Germans were on three sides, and the Russians held, and it began to snow. And in the morning, 93,000 Nazis were frozen in the snow, including 7 field marshals. The general who led that was Khrushchev. And when they made the switch there, the Communist Party, Khrushchev made a speech, and he went into the Comintern and he said, Stalin was a monster. I know, I was his assistant. And he said, he was a monster, he was a killer. And finally a guy said, what did you do when he was doing all that killing if you were his assistant? And he blew a gasket. He said, who said that? And they all hid under their desks. You know, and he said, that's what I did. That's a true story. Just cut for time. But it's true. Who's the most civilized politician I ever met? Nobody asked me. Gorbachev. Because when you ask him, what are the beautiful cities of the world? He said, first San Francisco, but actually Moscow, because that's where I met my wife. When he shows that vulnerability. How can we understand each other? We speak English and you speak Russian. He said, well, what can you do? You can try and understand. Remember when he came into Washington to meet Reagan? And he gets out of the car and shakes hands with people and declares perestroika and glasnost in Russia. And shaking hands with people on Pennsylvania Avenue. And then the cabinet met. And Alexander Haig said, Reagan said, the American president. And Haig said, you mean Gorbachev? Because he made friends immediately. And you notice they went to Helsinki, or where the hell were they? The town, anywhere where they signed up. And they agreed there didn't have to be a nuclear war. And, no small thing, Reagan loved his wife. She was always there for him. No small thing. They don't talk about it. Biden would say it if he had anybody smart enough writing for him to say it. But he hadn't. He's got all of those hacks. I'll tell you one joke before I go, just to break the tempo. You remember when Paula Jones sued Clinton? And he said, first of all, Hillary paid her off. Hillary gave her $863,000 to go away. It's verified. So when Clinton was asked about her, what about Paula Jones? He said, Paula Jones is what you find when you drag a $20 bill through a trailer park. So that night, I'm working in Washington. I go in and get a steak. I'm waiting for a table. Is the guy that manages campaign, Carville. And I said, what do you think of Clinton saying? That girl is what you get when you drag a $20 bill through a trailer park. And Corporal said, "That's how he got me." Good night, everybody. Thank you.